though, and I'm going to get a recording going. So we're at week 5. Yay. So our topic tonight is communication and intuition. And these used to be grouped together as one topic, and that we just did in 1 week. And then I believe it was just in Act 22, I believe. Maybe it was Act 21. I don't remember. But recently, I expanded to add an additional week for communication energy. So we actually, this week, are going to be largely focused on intuition. We're also going to touch on some communication best practices, and then we'll continue next week. And next week is actually very experiential because we're really going to be diving into exploring your communication energy and exploring and getting, feedback and input, and we're going to play some communication games. It's going to be really fun. Who watched the communication energy video today before we came to class? You actually didn't have to because so you all are ahead of the game. Doesn't that feel good? You're all ahead. So I had forgotten that indeed that we're not really going super deep dive into communication energy until next week. But I actually love that we did introduce that concept this week because it does kind of lay a foundation. Who has a takeaway just from the video, something that you came away with, or just something that struck you about the communication energy video? Anybody have something to share? Karen. You'll need to unmute. There you go.
I did. Well, I'm always surprised by how many people have different communication ways that they communicate and how they view themselves. Because I think that's a hard thing to look at yourself, because that's not how others see you. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it is exactly what you think and what they think. So communication is always interesting to me. And a few people had the same thing, but not quite. So, everybody's different.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I think that why I'm glad that we watched that video before class tonight, even though we're not directly going into detail of communication energy this week, is that it does really create a context that continues along with what we've been talking about with tools, not rules. Is there a right communication energy? No, there's just yours. And that's very true of the other things that we're going to be talking about in communication. I'm going to be offering some communication, some I want to say tips, but I don't even know if I would call them tips. They're suggestions, they're guidances, they're things to keep in mind. And then we're also going to go more deeply into intuition as well. But as always, this is tools, not rules. So let's talk about communication first. And I'm just going to go through, I'm feeling like I'd like to spend the bulk of this class on intuition. So I'm just going to touch on communication briefly, and then we'll kind of bookmark whatever we don't get to next week. So think of this as a really yummy, well, I was going to say sandwich, but then I thought Oreo cookie, right? It's like we've got 2 ends, so we're going to put 2 ends with communication and some intuition in the middle. That works, right? So in the guidebook for this week, you'll actually find that there are some suggestions, and there are, I believe there are 5. Let me double check. No, there are 7 suggestions for communication and making the most of communication with your clients. Now we're starting to move very gently into the territory where our topics now have to do with us, but they also have to do with our clients and students. So we're starting, because now we're working with communication and intuition, so we're still looking at, okay, what do these things mean to me? How is my own depth of awareness at play here? But we're also starting to look at how this shows up with other people too. So I'm going to go through these 7 practices or suggestions, and I just encourage you to take a couple of notes, capture some ideas. The guidebook this week will go into more depth with each one, because I think you can read a review of what I have to say, and that way we can really make the most of our time together. So the first guide for communication and really making the most of communicating with our abundance, through your gifts and skills. There are 7 of these, and the first one is to become aware of communication energy. We're going to talk about that next week, but it is the first tip or tool. Tip number 2 is to communicate when you listen. Communicate when you listen. And really what this means is that we have a listening energy as well. That when we're listening, we're also still communicating. It doesn't stop. Listening is a big part of the abundance model. You know, we've talked about how our job is really to help the client take her own steps, make her own discoveries. And in a really pure art abundance format, the coach is maybe speaking maybe 20% of the time, maybe 25%, with the client speaking the rest of the time. And so what is the coach doing when she's not speaking? Well, she's holding space, she's creating a container, and she's deeply listening. And so there's a communication that continues. And so one thing we're going to talk about next week is that our communication energy isn't just when we're talking, it's also when we're listening as well. And it's very much about what we're being, not what we're doing. So communicate when you listen is our tip number 2. And number 3 is listen when you communicate. Before I say anything more about that, just real quickly, just sketch or draw those 2. Draw, communicate when you listen, and listen when you communicate. Just real quick little sketches. So who has something to share about what you think, what comes to you when you think of what it means to listen when you communicate? Who has a thought?
This is something I realize I don't do much or well or could improve on. Let's say improve on. Really listening to what I'm saying while I'm saying it, and keeping in mind, especially my nonverbals. My face is very expressive and I roll my eyes all the time when I'm speaking. And when I'm listening, I try to keep a softer face, but I'm a little out of control when I speak, and I've got to learn, A, not to speak as much, and B, to speak with more intention.
So listen when you communicate. Rothko, you definitely hit on one of these, which is to listen to yourself and be intentional and really allow a process to sink into the words with conscious intention as you're communicating. Another part of listening while you communicate is listening to the other person even when they're not speaking, because that's what gives us an opportunity to kind of pick up on the cues that they're giving us. Because communication, if I'm speaking to, say I'm speaking to Diana, I'm looking at her right here. She's beautiful. Hello, Diana. If I'm speaking to Diana, the communication is not from me or Diana. It's between us. It's something that's happening in the middle. And the same thing is true as I'm speaking to you all as a group. The communication is happening in this little place, this magic place in between us. And so listening when we communicate allows that, so it's not a one way. It's not like, boom, I speak, now I listen. Boom, I communicate, now I listen. It's like both of those energies are being maintained all the time. And in fact, one might play around with the idea that listening and speaking, if we were to draw a picture of what that looks like, that they're really the same, and to explore that. And we're going to talk more about that next week. How do we maintain an authentic communication energy when we're not talking? How does that feel to somebody else? And how can we be aware of listening even when we're talking? That's when intuition comes in, right? When there's space for us to pick up on not just body language and cues, but also pick up on, the little gifts that intuition might be bringing at any given moment. Anyone else have a thought about these two sides? Communicate while you listen, listen while communicate, or something else you see in your drawing. Wendy C.
I'm just thinking that for me, it's just getting into that space where you are fully present. You don't have any distractions. You're one-on-one with them. And you can tell when people are and when they're not. So that's my take.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Our next one is number 4. And it is to clarify goals. And this is helpful just to remember that it's very helpful for you and your client or your student or your colleague or really anybody in your life, but to just be on the same page, to just have an easy way to just maintain that you're both on the same page and to just check in. And you'll find your own way to do this. Sometimes it's helpful to just kind of have, especially in coaching, like a go-to phrase that just allows you to check in and say something like, so how about we go further into this with an art assignment? How does that sound? Or is there something in particular you'd like to come away with after this session? It's just a way to check in and make sure that you're both on the same page and that you both are, that you have the same goal in mind. Now, abundance is an interesting modality because it's so spontaneous and so, hold on just a second. This is so funny. My son has a new phone and he can use it for family, and he has one friend that Mom and we have allowed, another Kai actually. Kai and Kai are best friends. And so they're allowed to text each other, and oh my gosh, like the memes and emojis, like, wow, okay. So I had the phone and I thought I turned the volume off, but it was still humming. It was full of communication energy. Oh my goodness, it's a whole new world. So anyway, what I was saying was that having an awareness of being on the same page. If your client has an agenda, or if you have an agenda, that can get in the way of something that is happening spontaneously. And yet, it is natural for clients to sometimes come with something very specific. Our abundance is very much a play in the moment, kind of, let's see what comes up. But it can be helpful at the beginning of a session to ask, is there something you'd like to shift? What would you like to come away with? What would you like to explore? And then I always suggest halfway through a session, kind of checking in with a phrase that might be something like, so shall we continue along this, or would you like to move to something else? Because what likely came up in the moment was probably really awesome and really cool, and it definitely is there to, bring a wonderful gift to your client. But if she has something kind of in her mind like, oh, but I really wanted to talk about this, it allows that transition to happen. Another thing that we'll get to once we start talking about art assignments, there's always a question from trainees that says, wow, this happens really, really fast because art assignments work really quickly. And people always ask, well, what am I supposed to do with the rest of the session? Because you can land on a takeaway with an archaeology art assignment in like 5 minutes. And, what do I do next? And again, get on the same page. Ask and say, would you like to go deeper with this? Or is there a theme or topic or question you'd like to explore? That also helps your client feel very comfortable, right? Just feel comfortable that there is this nice combination between sort of having room to roam, but that there also is a container around it. So this idea of having clear goals, I'm talking about it now in a coach and client context, but it's true in any kind of communication, right? Just looking for opportunities when you can check about being on the same page. So I love taking words literally. Draw a quick sketch of being on the same page as the person with whom you're communicating. Whatever comes up, just draw it. Being on the same page. Who sees something in your drawing? If you look at your drawing, what's something you notice just as looking at this drawing? What's something new or just something that grabs your attention that might be important about communication, or a message about communication that you see when you look at this? Zara.
It's a dance. It's a dance for me. It seems to be a dance. Yeah, it's a dance.
Mm-hmm. A dance. Awesome. Anybody else see something from your drawing? Terry?
Connection, like just really together. So definitely the dance, joy, but the connection.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Awesome. Anybody else see something? And Brian?
We are both literally on the same page and happy with our positioning.
Let's see it. Put it up again.
It's tiny, so.
Oh, there you are. Oh, look how cute you are. Oh, you're so cute. Terry showing hers. There you are on the same page, dancing and connecting. Oh, look, we have so many little pink pages. Hold on. There's Rothko, same page. Oh my gosh, so cute. There's Zara. Oh, look, they're dancing. I love it. Let's see, here's Amy. Amy, stick it back up there. Oh, look how sweet. And Jan. Jan, pull yours back up. I wasn't quite fast enough. There it is. There, wait.
There.
Here they are. Awesome. Yeah, I have this sense right now of, stories, right? Look, there's Lily. I'll put Lily up, trying to get everybody. Look, there they are. Love it. Yeah, there's this sense of story, right? And being part of the same story. There's Kelly. Oh, I love it. Walking to a rainbow. And the nice thing is that if you just realize you're on the same page, there's something about that that's very, very grounding. And I love that it has a creative connection, because it's like we're both in this story together. We don't know where it's going to go. We don't know where it's going to end. We each have different roles. We each have, we each bring different things to the story, but we're in the same story and we're creating. Life isn't a tidy narrative. We don't know how it's going to end. A coaching session, we don't know how it's going to end. And in fact, when we do, that's when we can kind of get into trouble, because that's when we're kind of putting the brakes on the magic. So being on the same page means not only are we clarifying our goals, but it also means we're here to play and let this unfold in its magic. The next guide piece that I wanted to bring forward, and I write about this more in the guidebook, is to address challenges directly. Sometimes things do come up between client and coach, as well as in any relationship. But with client and coach, it's really one of the best things you can do for your client is to just very gently and confidently bring forward challenges when they exist. If there feels like there's a resistance, or maybe there's a misunderstanding, or something that's just not quite right there, it can feel more comfortable to just say, okay, well, I'll just sort of let this work out, and this will just kind of work out on its own. And it probably will, but it also is a very it's an empowering thing for both you and for your client to just speak very gently and just say, hey, there's something I'm noticing here. And a term that you'll hear me use over and over as we get more into coaching with our abundance is get in and get out. And what that means is open a door, let the client share, pull back, right? And we'll talk about this over and over, but this is a great example to say something like, I'm noticing that maybe there's something that I'm maybe picking up that you might be frustrated with something, or there may be some tension. What's going on? And then get out and let the client speak and let her share and hold that. And the really neat thing is that if there is some kind of challenge that's existing interpersonally, or anything that's really getting in the way, if that's there, that's great. I mean, it's great to work with. I mean, and it doesn't even have to be about you. So I'm thinking of an example. Say I'm presenting an art assignment to somebody. I say, hey, do you want to play with this? And they're like, yeah. And so we do a story completion, and I say, so what do you see? And the client gives nothing. The client says, yeah, nothing. They say, well, look again, is there anything? No, really, there's not. Well, just the fact that she is obviously not, super psyched about the art assignment that she just did, that in itself is something great to work with. And, draw a picture of how you're feeling right now. How do you feel about this art assignment? What color is this art assignment experience bringing up for you? So even the fact if something's not working for a client, that's actually good. Work with that. Our job isn't always to have like the big epic aha. It's just to let the art assignments move us forward. And we'll talk more about this with coaching, but it goes hand in hand with just being direct and being the one that holds that. That's our job as the coach, is to check in. And it doesn't have to be, really big and heavy. If it's something that feels like you need a little support with, you can ask your colleagues or your mentor or other people for some suggestions or support. But feel free in the moment to just say, hey, I just want to check in. How are you feeling? Get in and get out. Doesn't need a lot of explanation. I'm sensing this resistance and I'm sensing that dead. And when I said this is no. Just check in. Just checking in. How are you doing? That's it. Shall we continue along this line or should we move in another direction? That's it. And then if it brings up, if a client says, yeah, and has stuff to bring up, then give the space for that. But it's good to be direct, because if you're feeling intuitively, something's off, something's not quite right, it's going to benefit your client and you if you just speak it. And then it often will just clear the air. Just want to check in. How are you doing right now? Well, I guess I'm kind of distracted. I totally get that. How about we take a few deep breaths together? Oh, that sounds great. That's as simple as it is, as opposed to fumbling through a whole session, wondering what's wrong. She doesn't want me to coach her anymore. I have to be brilliant. What am I going to do now? Like that, that's just taking us down a whole road that we don't need to go to. So that's addressing challenges directly. The next tip is to be aware of your personal communication blocks. And this is really a personal journey to identify what gets in the way of you having the most clear, the most authentic, and the most alive communication. What are the things that get in the way? It's not wrong to have things that impede your best communication. We all have them. And so it's looking, is it that you get distracted, or that there's a tendency to multitask, or at the end of the day, you start to feel kind of, loopy in your brain and you're not quite as alert? Or is it that when certain topics come up, you get a little bristly because maybe if a client is talking about a certain topic like money, maybe that makes you kind of nervous and puts you into, worrying, how can I fix this? How can I fix this? There are things that will trigger you, or will cause you pause, or will get you in your head, or will get you reflecting about yourself rather than your client. And all of that is totally normal. It's not wrong. And the more we're aware of what those things are, then it's kind of like in meditation, and they always say, like, if you're trying to empty your mind of thoughts, and if a thought comes in, you just say hello thought and goodbye. And it's kind of like that, because things are going to come in. You're feeling, oh, I'm getting a weird little competitive thing coming up. No big deal. I see you, I'll deal with you later, because there are things that come up that they're supposed to, that's fine, but in a session is not the time for it, that's all. And so when our sweet emotional system knows that we're going to pay attention to it and give it love and give it attention, it won't be as quick to try to, act out. And it'll know that, okay, we'll come back to this later. It's always great after a session to reflect on, any notes of things that came up with the client, but also to, note anything that came up for you. Because we learn about ourselves through coaching, and we're supposed to. That's a good thing. And it's also helpful to just kind of have a system for ourselves so that we know, okay, this is coming up, doesn't matter, back to the client. And also to not get lost in the, oh, now I'm thinking about me, I'm so rotten, I'm terrible at this. Who did I ever think I was? Look at me, I just threw crayons all over the floor, literally, I totally did. So that's awesome. So, and that's what can happen, right? That's exactly it, and so that doesn't help. That doesn't help. Another thing to be aware of is we're aware of the things that can get in our communication, in our way. Mine might be art supplies and junk in my way. That might be my issue. So if we're aware of the things that keep us from being at our most authentic clean, pure. You get to decide what that word is for you. For me, I know my communication, my essence that I want to tap into is alive. I want to be alive. I want the communication to be alive. That's my word, alive, right? And so I need to look at, and I get to look at the things that make it not alive. So one thing that also helps is to, if we identify what those things are, we can also look at, okay, well, what are the warning signs so that we can be aware of them? So one in specific I bring up is the urge to speak, the urgency, the urgent desire to speak. It's a helpful clue. That's all it is. It's not bad. It's not bad. It's just a clue that maybe we might be turning our conscious awareness and intention away from the client and onto ourselves. It's just a little clue. And it happens to everybody. But when we feel that urge of needing to say something, that's a clue often that it's coming from some kind of ego place. And that doesn't mean that it's intentional. And this is largely, if not entirely, subconscious, right? So it's not like we're sitting there thinking, oh, okay, I have to say something now to assert my skill, you know, or to, you know, to put myself here in this place. It's not like that's consciously happening, at least not all the time. But what we can start to recognize is the very subtle difference between the urge to speak and the quiet desire. You know, there's a difference between oh, there's an idea and it pops in, and it doesn't matter if we say it or not. It doesn't matter. There's a difference between that and that urge that, you know, I need to say something. I need to say something. So say I'm with a client and she is sharing something about her art assignment. I get an intuitive hit. This taps in with our intuition topic. I get a hit about something with her and fabric, you know, and I want to ask and I want to say, you know, is there a significance around fabric with you? And I just get that in, you know, coming through. There's a difference between, fabric, me writing it down, doesn't matter if I say it or not, it's just there. And me feeling like I need to say this. There's a difference between an urge and an excitement. Sometimes they're hard to distinguish. The nice thing about the excitement is we can be excited to share when people are doing art assignments, and, you know, as a coach, and we're going to be getting into this in future weeks, as a coach, it's amazing because, you know, this is where it's fun because we see all these connections, and art assignments make for such creative coaching. It's, you know, it takes it out of just a heady psychology, you know, cognitive therapeutic exercise, and it's fun and it's playful. But we also can hold back on those things. And if they come up, great. And if they don't, that's great too. You know, if we get to the end of the session and that fabric image or idea didn't come back around, I can shoot her an email, you know, if I want to. By the way, this is something that popped into my mind in case it's relevant. Or I don't have to. And more often than not, in a few weeks, she's going to come and say, you know what? I had this amazing thought. Remember a couple of weeks ago, I wrote that story? What if I took it to fabric? She came there on her own. That's usually what happens. And we get to say yes, because one of the things that I hope that the Art Abundance Technique models is it's a Thich Nhat Hanh quote about the Tao Te Ching, sorry, not Thich Nhat Hanh, the Tao Te Ching, who says, when the master leads, the people don't even know he exists. The people say, look, we did it all by ourselves. And that's what we're creating here. We want them to say, look, we did it all by ourselves. We want them to say, whoa, I had this idea. And then we get to know inside, wow, that's pretty cool. That's awesome. Look at that, how intuition played out and the process played out. Because I promise you, more times than not, the insight that somebody comes to on their own will stick so much more than when it comes from outside. That's the difference between people getting inspiration from outside, even really, really good advice. I could give great advice to a client, but she is going to internalize it when she comes it to herself. And that is a big key about what this whole technique is about. So all of that to say, the things that, this is all just in that category of what gets in the way. What are some of the blocks that get in our way? Draw a picture of you and a client and something that symbolizes a really, again, you can come up with your own word, just really positive, flowing, true communication between you, whatever that is. I say clean just because that feels very fresh, but it can be any word. Draw something that symbolizes that very clear and good, alive, magic communication, ease, free. These are some other words. And this is just a quickie. Now add something to your sketch that somehow represents what gets in the way. What gets in the way? You might have a thought that you already know, and so you draw something to symbolize that. Or you may just add an image and not have any idea what it means. Either way is fine, but add something to your picture that somehow represents what gets in the way. All right, let's hear from some folks. What did you notice? What came up in your drawing? Karen, what came up for you?
Well, I drew a crystal ball because that's one of the things that gets in the way sometimes. If you think you have to have a crystal ball, you have to know the answer. And sometimes that leads you into trying to think of the next really great question instead of being there for the moment.
Excellent. Yes, the crystal ball. And a crystal ball, that's great intentions, right? Usually the things that do get in our way are great intentions. That's what's important, is knowing there's nothing wrong with any of this. It's just about making the very best use of our skills and our gifts. Anyone else aware of something that potentially gets in the way of really smooth communication? Lily.
The bladder.
Did you say the
Sometimes-
blather or the bladder?
I said the bladder. Sometimes our own personal needs, you know, take effect, and or even like especially like when you're doing virtual communication and you're online, and all of a sudden the nose is dripping. You know, it's a whole different story now to wipe your nose than it used to be, you know, before all this virus stuff. So like taking care of our, even as much as we take care of our own personal needs beforehand, and even if you go to the bathroom right before and you blow your nose right before, but it can be distracting. Is you know,
Yeah.
so right now, so I just got an itch while I was saying that, and the microwave went off, and I'm like, okay, good, I get to eat soon.
So
Can I just say, I want to add a thing that sometimes I feel like when I'm in the reverse, when I'm being coached, and I'm galloping along and I'm saying, and the person is listening to me and they're hearing, and we're on the same page. We're totally on the same page, and I just need to get this much farther to tie it all together and say, and this is why, blah blah blah, and then they say, oh yeah, but what was the blah, blah, blah? I'm like, no, I don't want to talk about the blah, blah, blah. I'm here. Stay with me here right now. You're ruining the mood, kind of a thing. And that's what I don't want to do to other people. And sometimes I find that it just helps to put the tongue on top of, I don't remember what you call the roof of the mouth, but like when you just put your tongue there, to hold out so that you don't say something, or just, to smile or, whatever it is, kind of a thing. That's what I need to remember, that thinking the next thought, like, but they really want me to stay there now with this thought, just like I want to stay there with this thought.
Yeah.
With me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of it comes with confidence and being really comfortable with, because art abundance is a process, is completely taking your hands off the steering wheel. I mean, if we really go all into how this works, we have no idea where it's going. And that is the total joy of it, because it means we can just loosen up. We don't have to figure out a thing. And we don't have to plan anything. We don't have to figure it out. We just use our tools and show up with our communication. And then the joy becomes where really just listening and being with the client where they are, nothing's more interesting than that, that's the intriguing part, is, not trying to figure it out, but just being with that client right there. And a lot of that comes with, I think, comfort and confidence and just trusting and knowing that it works. So yeah, knowing what gets in the way of communication is really, really helpful. The final tip or guide or I need a better word for tip. Anybody have a thought? What's a better word for a tip? It's something, it's more of it's a tip, it's a tool, it's a practice. Zara, what are you saying?
Container.
Container, yeah, container, it's something. It's a container, there's something. We'll play. Yeah, Jan, what is it?
Touchstone.
A touchstone. We have cornerstones, so maybe these are touchstones. There's something, yeah, something like that. Guidelines, clues, who knows? Anyway, thank you all. You've got it, right? The last little thing to hold here about communication that you'll read about in your guidebook is to keep all of these things in mind in terms of how you structure your sessions and your practice. So for example, keep in mind, hey, I have a lot more energy in the morning. So it would stand to reason, schedule your sessions and your classes in the morning. Know the things, I tend to, let's see, another example might be, I tend to really be at my best for about 40 minutes and then I can get a blood sugar drop. So, keep your coaching sessions to 30 to 40 minutes. Just be aware that part of it, when we're aware of the things that get in the way, one of our jobs is to, work on those things ourselves, right? Remember and think, okay, I'll journal about this later. I'll do my own art assignment about whatever's coming up. But then there are also things that we can do just in terms of our planning. Having our list, as Lily brought up, of all the things we want to kind of check off before our class or before our session, putting our sign on our door, making sure that the dog is taken care of. The things that, there are so many things that are not in our control that it's very helpful to plan ahead with the things that we can control as much as we can. So those are communication takeaways. Let's see. I think I'm feeling pretty complete. Everybody, if you could go to the chat and just write one thing in the chat that you want to remember or hold on to. about these 7 suggestions or anything that we've talked about. You will remember it more if you write it. So that's what we're going to do. So just write one thing that you've heard or that you've thought that really resonates and feels important. You guys are so, so smart. Everything here is awesome. All right, drawing time again. Now that we've kind of played with this, just do a quick little 30-second sketch of communication. Whatever's coming forward to you right now, something that represents communication. And another quick drawing or sketch that represents intuition. We're transitioning now from communication to intuition. What's something you notice when you look at your 2 drawings? You have a drawing for communication and a drawing for intuition. What do you notice? Let's see if there's anybody who hasn't shared yet today. Wendy F. Hey.
My sketch is pretty rough, but the communication, I was just trying to just very quickly express that different things are coming out of this, and this person has their eyes open, mouth open to communicate. And the intuition is over here where the eyes are closed. It's a more peaceful expression and the energy is coming in. And it's, coming into the mind, the consciousness, rather than something coming out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it kind of looks like they're part of the same picture too.
Yeah, it's kind of, I didn't intend it that way, but it ended up that way. It's kind of,
That's neat. That's neat. Anybody else have something to share just about your drawing or what you see? Caroline? Hey.
Hey. Okay, so communication, I felt, was like a mirroring. It was like more of a horizontal communication thing. Intuition was like, there's a little third eye and there's a little chair above my head. And it's like, it's information coming down from heaven almost. So more horizontal, more vertical.
Love it. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. And kind of similar with what Wendy said about, in and out. Really cool. What is intuition? Let me just open that up. What is intuition? If you had to explain it, let's just open this up where anybody can share. How would you describe it, or how would you explain it? What's intuition, Jan?
I had to unmute myself on my end. I call it a hit. I don't know if it's from inside me or from outside me. Sometimes it's both, sometimes it's one or the other. It doesn't really matter. It's just something that feels different than my ego talking to me. It feels like, where did that come from?
Someone else, how would you describe intuition? Sarah?
Nudge feeling. So I'm getting nudged and it's a feeling.
Nudge feeling. Love it. Who else? Diana?
I think that intuition is a knowing. It's something that it's a feeling that you just know something without. Sometimes you can't even explain it logically. It's just there. It's a knowing. It's kind of comes from the gut, I think, or from the heart, and you just know. And one thing I noticed when I wasn't here, I couldn't find the connection to get on the Zoom meeting, so I wasn't here for the communication energy drawing. So, but the one I did, I don't know if you can see it just now. I look at communication energy as external, going from one person to another or a group of people, but that way. And intuition is a coming in. And the thing I noticed that I think we sometimes forget is when we're in conversation and we're sharing communication energy and we have intuitive things coming through, the other person or the other people are also having intuitive things come through. And I think we sometimes forget that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Excellent point. Someone else, intuition. Donna.
Oh, I am off. Yeah, but I was thinking it is that knowing, and again, I don't always know where it's coming from, but if I'm busy talking, then I don't get that intuition because if I'm thinking about but if I'm listening and I'm really present, then, I'll see colors or I get ideas. So I know it's almost like I have to be grounded and like calm, because if I'm like worried about what I'm going to say to them, and if I'm busy and it won't come through, it only comes through when I'm just, I don't know, relaxed in that sense. So again, I don't know if it's always vertically, although I guess if I'm grounded, touching the earth, that's vertical too. So I don't know, because sometimes it feels like it radiates out. It's not like it pops in. It's just sometimes like, oh, you just know. And there's a calmness about it compared to the ego where it's almost like that back when you said like that urge to speak. That ego has a different feeling instead of just this kind of flow and calmness,
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? This is great. What is intuition? Eileen.
So I see it as the inner divine voice of my higher self, showing me the way and guiding me, and I can trust it. And my little image I drew a while ago, it actually starts in my heart because it's the divine within me that already resides there, and it spirals up through the third eye into my head so that I then recognize it as thoughts and feelings and actually the mental aspect of it, and then it goes to the outside as an exclamation point, like wow.
I love that. That's awesome. Thanks, Eileen. Kelly.
As people are talking, I'm thinking that intuition always feels loving to me. It doesn't feel judgmental. It doesn't feel negative. It just feels full of positive energy, full of love, full of empathy, all those things that attune us to other people and to ourselves.
Oh, that's great. Why why is intuition part of this journey? Why is intuition important with what we're doing here, do you think? Why are we talking about it? Why does it play a role? Yeah, Donna.
I mean, sometimes it's that nonverbal. I mean, like you said, if you're talking to a client, you just have that feeling like, uh-oh, I need to either go further or bring up a question. So sometimes it's that nonverbal that you just hear, so to speak, or feel. I guess I feel sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So just being aware that it can come up with a client and know that it's that nonverbal communication. Rothko, what were you going to say?
It's part of it is being aware of when someone's energy has shifted and being curious about what that is. Something pushed a button or something came up. What is that? Just that awareness. The other part is, we really need to sort of sometimes read between the lines. And it's mostly, I think it's mostly an energy that you sense.
Yeah. I think one time I was talking about intuition anyway, or it was actually in an art assignment, and that phrase "reading between the lines" came up. It was in a class, and yeah, it's like reading in between the lines is when we have to figure it out. Intuition is more like, it's like smelling between the lines, right? It's just there, right? We don't have to think about it. It's just a whiff, right? Or a taste. It's just a sense. And we as quickly as we can sense something, we're aware of it. Wendy F., were you raising your hand?
Oh yeah, I just what you were initially asking was, why does it seem that intuition has a part in this whole art abundance thing? And I was immediately thinking about a conversation you and I had actually in one of our one-on-ones, where how I feel anyway about as we're doing an art assignment, as we're creating some kind of art, it's that connection that we have with the page, with the pencils, with the materials. There's something about that act of creating. Something spiritual happens, where something comes in through us that we didn't expect. And to me, that's what intuition is as well. That's where intuition comes in creatively. And to me, that's what why it's important in art abundance, is because creativity and spirituality are basically like this, and there's no disconnecting them. It's just going to happen. And
awesome.
Meaning intuition. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Karen.
Yes. Well, I think intuition is so important, because lots of times your client will start out saying something that they want, and you intuitively know that that's not where we're going. And so just be prepared for that they're going to tell you something that they don't necessarily really want. And so being able to guide them that way with art and just the support of that, because it comes to you, it's like, that's not what she really wants. So let's find out what she really wants. And just being able to follow that. And I'm paying attention to that too, because sometimes it's hard to separate intuition from what you think the client might want. So you're not really thinking, you're just there with it, the intuition. Because you could think about it and say, oh, she should be doing this or she should be doing that. And you want to take that should right out of there. Yeah.
Anybody else who hasn't shared anything today, or at least with this this question? Terry, what is intuition? How would you describe it?
Oh, okay. I was going to answer something different. Okay, but I would describe
That's
it
fine.
as was not going to. Oh, okay. So the way I would describe it is like the background. I think of forms like our thoughts and our emotions, our feelings, our senses. Even they come into form and they go out of. You know what I mean? They rise and they fall. Intuition helps us to tap into the background, the silence, the part that's tapped into the pure essence of eternal, timeless, ageless, creative source. It's not us. It's the intelligence. I think of the ego as very clever, but it's not intelligent. It's actually very stupid. But the intuition taps us into the deeper intelligence, which then helps guide us to be quiet often, especially someone like me, and to just be present. So it's about presence.
Wonderful, lovely, lovely. Eileen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, let me see what, the value of having intuition is one of the principles. It works for me directly. Like when we were going through the tips of the communication, to know when it's me wanting to say something or it's being driven by divine time. I mean, because several people said it has to do with, you know, that intuition comes as a peaceful voice, and I can distinguish that for myself. Is it the agitated, no, we need to do that, or she needs to quit talking so I can tell her what to, you know, like that kind of stuff, or is it, something came to me, and then suggest, well, like what you were saying earlier, would you like to go deeper on this, or, you know, whatever. So that is perfect for me to use the principle, but then it's also perfect for people I'm coaching to use the principle as well, because oftentimes people aren't connected to what I see as their divine within higher self. And it gives, you know, participants the opportunity to discover that for themselves, and how they can then distinguish between the agitated voice and the calm and peaceful voice of the intuition.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely, Eileen hit on exactly one of the things that I was thinking. You've all created this collage of intuition. Intuition is important to develop in this process because, one, it develops confidence in ourselves, right? When we can really know that voice and trust it and know it, there is such a great sense of agency and self-reliance, and it's ironically, you know, when we know that we can let go of control, we feel more in control, right? Because and so, you know, really honing that voice, it is one of our tools. It's what we bring, just like we bring our assignments, we bring intuition, and it's there to help us. And, you know, our abundance is so much, it's not just a tool we share with each other, it's a tool we share with ourselves, right? And our own path of self-awareness, and our own journey. And of course, everything that we do to promote and expand our own healing, of course, is just making a difference to everybody in our circles and our lives. And so connecting to our own intuition and our own guidance will just help us deepen our own creative delight and our own expression and our own our capacity to share and express freely and joyfully. And then the third thing that I think that intuition, why it really plays a role, and why I think it's important that we dive into it and we really look closely at intuition is because when we feel very nimble and agile with intuition, we're going to be able to help our clients recognize that. And, you know, we may, who knows what kind of language we may use. It depends on our client. It depends on our practice. You know, is this the divine message? Is this, you know, the you know, the little voice or the gut feeling? But that's what part of what we're here to do, is to help our clients feel connected to that. Because everyone experiences intuition. I mean, that's what I think is so wild, is that if you start listening to success stories, and if you specifically look to see, okay, where's the part of this story that intuition comes in? It's always there. You know, you can be hearing some corporate business person talking about big corporate real estate takeovers or whatever it is. There's an intuition piece in there somewhere. There's always an intuition in any story. It looks like intuition plays a part in so many stories. There's a place where we tap into that. And so I just invite you to connect to a time in your life where you listened to your intuition. This can be something very small. It doesn't have to be a big, huge, the seas parted and then I listened to my intuition. This can be something very subtle, or it can be something very significant. Think to a time when I listened to my intuition, and you can just use this prompt. I remember one time I listened to my intuition was, and we're just going to free write with this for about 1.5 minutes. If you can just write whatever comes to mind. If you get stuck, just go back to the phrase, I remember. So we'll do 1.5 more minutes. If you need a prompt, I remember. So this began, I remember one time when I listened to my intuition was, And bring that to a close. And now illustrate this story. Another minute and a half to just draw an illustration to illustrate this story. Make sure that you have something that represents you and something that represents intuition in this picture. So again, we're back at, I remember one time I listened to my intuition was, now you're just drawing a picture to illustrate that memory and include something that represents you and something that represents intuition. I'm going to put you into partners now to just share your story. You can either read it, or if you like, you can tell it, but it might be easier to read it. And I just invite you to read the story, and if you're on video, to share the picture. And then you'll switch. And I'll give you, let's see, I'm going to give you 10 minutes with your partner to talk about, after you've each shared your story, then you can just talk about whatever, anything else that comes up. I am going to go ahead and put you with your partner, and you'll get an invitation to go. Oh. Okay, now I got it. Okay, here we go. So I'll come back, we'll come back at 25 after. Hey guys, welcome back. I hope I got everybody matched up. We had a couple of things. Caroline, did you end up with anybody, or were you alone? You were with?
Yeah, I was good.
With Diane. Okay, good, good, awesome, awesome. All right, Well, everybody will be back in 15 seconds. Hello, hello, welcome back. Welcome back. So I really wanted you to have some one-on-one time. You know, it was really interesting. Intuition was definitely at play today because as you'll see when you get to the guidebook, there are a series of tips around intuition, but I really thought you guys needed to teach the class this week instead of me, and you did great because I was just feeling it, and it was awesome because I loved that we got to get so many great perspectives and then also have a little back and forth time. And it's really interesting because you know how I was obviously having just some weird resistance to the word tip. I've never had that before. I'm not sure what that is. It was really bothering me. You probably could see it every time I said it. I was like, tip or whatever. So while you guys were off, I was trying to figure out, okay, what is it? What is it? And I was saying, well, maybe I can come up with, I'm still not sure what it is, but I did come up with what I wanted it to be. So what I came up, I came up with the word hint, which I like. And so I wrote communication hints, and then I wrote intuition hint, but it looked like mint. And so I had this thought of little hint mints, and that these little suggestions are just like, you know, when you suggest someone take a mint, right? They're just tasty, tiny tidbits of freshness and flavor, and they ease digestion and create calm. So for some reason, like I said, I've taught this class many, many times, and I've never not wanted them to be tips. But for right now, I'm actually going to edit your guidebook. So you will receive hint mints for communication and intuition. However, the people who are not here and are watching the recording will have no idea what that means until they get the recording. So, hint mints. I'll just pass you a little mint for a little bit of freshness. And then I thought here on the property, Kai loves to take the mint and chew on mint, fresh mint. So it's also things to chew on, right? A little bit of freshness. All right, so something you're coming away with. Something, it could be in your partnership or just anything that came forward. Let's just hear from a few of you, especially if we haven't heard from you yet tonight. That's especially a special invitation for you. And we've heard from you, that's okay too. You can raise your hand, but I'm just keeping a special eye out for anybody. Zara, what are you coming away with?
Well, it's my intention is before I start the session is I'm going to go into prayer and I'm going to say, okay, you know, Lord, how do you want to use me? Open myself up to receive intuitive messages. So set my intention ahead of time to be that open vessel for that information. And I said it, I just got goosebumps, you know, it's just like, yeah.
Excellent. Yep. Anyone else has a takeaway of any kind? Caroline.
Did you unmute me?
I did.
Okay, thank you. I loved it when you said, or when it came up about clients get it much more deeply when they think they made it up instead of it coming from outside. And then I thought about my own artwork and how true that is, you know, and teaching my students. It's like I'll suggest something and then, you know, next week they say, look at this cool thing I just invented. Isn't this cool? And it's so fun because they really get it.
Yep, absolutely. And it comes in a different way. And, you know, and sometimes it takes a day, sometimes it's, you know, years later. I mean, you know, but it really, it is, that's when people, all of us, that's when we absorb things, is when we come up with them. And so the model of our abundance is really all about a client coming away not saying, oh my gosh, what an amazing coach, she's so amazing, but a client coming away going, oh my gosh, I'm so amazing. That's what we really want, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a little bit of a shift, and that's something we can even bring into our relationships. The wonderful thing about all these different coaching things is that we can practice them, put them into practice in our relationships, right? We can, in non-coaching contexts, we can be aware of the urge to speak. We can be aware of creating more silence. We can be in tune with our intuition. We can, hold back instead of giving forward. There's all these things that we can do, so that people come away feeling that they're awesome, more and more of the time. It's really cool.
Very.
So I would love to hear more about the stories of a time when you remember experiencing and listening to intuition in the pictures. I'm going to make that a follow-up thread, so if you can post that. I'll also invite you to look back at your picture, maybe even tomorrow, and just look back at it and see if there's something else, another piece or another aspect that the picture brings forward. You remember the incident, you wrote about it, but is there something else in this picture? Perhaps if you look at the size at which things are given, or the proximity, or something unusual, or turn the picture upside down and squint at it as if you were looking at shapes in the clouds. And do you see something else, and what that might have to do with intuition? So that's a way for this art assignment to continue. You can also try the same with thinking of a time when you didn't follow your intuition, if you can remember one of those. And again, it can be something very subtle or very small, or it can be something major, but a time that you're aware when you didn't follow or you didn't listen to intuition. And write that story and that picture, and again, look at the picture, turn it upside down, see what else is there. So that's just a way you can continue to play. I'm grateful for you all here. Thank you for co-teaching the class, and enjoy your hint mints. I am going to unmute everyone so that we can bid good night. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night,
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, next week.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
on the forum.
Thank you.
Carrie.
Okay.
Aloha.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
This is like the best part.
I know. It's awesome. I love singing, talking, hearing
This is
people's voices.
awesome. It's amazing. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night.
It's asking me
Night.
if I'm sure I want to leave. I don't know. I don't.